Hi there, guys. Oh, I don't want to exit. Hi there, guys. This is Trish the Beekeeper. I'm using OBS to allow my computer screen to be captured by video so that you can see it on YouTube for a presentation I'm going to give. Today it's about installing your nuke. Wear your veil. Even if you're just lifting up the lid to take a peek at the sugar syrup jars, just wear your veil. Even if you're just going out to see how the bees are doing, just wear your veil. You can always take it off once you get there if you're just watching from a distance. Okay, so now for our presentation about installing a nuke. Oops, no, we're going to start our slideshow. You're not a beekeeper yet. Got to go through this first. The first day you get your bees. Oh, driving with bees in my car. All right, well, when you pick up your nuke, I'm sure they'll point out, your nuke is pretty well sealed up. There's always a couple of bees clinging somewhere. So if you're not wearing gloves, grab the box kind of carefully. If there's a bee where you're going to put your hand and you are slowly putting your fingers down, she'll just move out of the way, or you can gently move her out of the way. And I wear my veil when I'm driving with bees in the car in case I'm rear-ended or something and there's a surprise. And in the hopes if there's a police officer and he sees me driving with a veil on, he'll leave me alone. And to see what other people's expressions are when I'm stopped at a stoplight. All right. It is actually not nearly as stressful as you would think. It's fine to have them next to you in the driver's side, in the passenger side seat. Don't sit with them on your lap. Do not let them be in the sun. Do not let them get too hot. It's all right if they get cold, like you have the AC on or the windows open. So there you go. So what is a nucleus hive or a nuke? It arrives with a queen, all brood in all stages, nurse bees, and forager bees. So just a reminder, before you leave, everything should be all set up. A solid hive stand. I use cinder blocks. Oh, you're going to want shims. Shims are helpful to level things. If things are a little wobbly with the ground not being flat. I don't want it any lower than 8 inches, just to make it a little harder for creatures to come over and scratch at the entrance of the hive. I don't want it any higher than like 18 inches up, because I'm going to be stacking boxes on top of here eventually. I really recommend getting Apivar strips before you get the hive, so you can put them in the same day. Apivar kills mites. It requires 4 to 6 weeks to do its full job, and it's great to start your beekeeping adventure with a clean slate. Apivar, the chemical in it that's killing the mites, is the same thing as what's in Frontline. So this is pretty benign to everything except mites. But follow the label. The label is the law. I really recommend putting in a pollen patty, just like 1/3 of the pollen patty, just freeze the rest. And this way, so if there's a stretch of time after you install the bees where they can't forage, they do have some pollen stored in there. But once they use it up, they eat the baby bees, and this slows their progress. So better to avoid this. Sugar syrup, yeah, you're going to really want that sugar syrup. Oh, you can disregard what's in the menu on the left there. This is cobbled together from another talk. And I use 2 parts sugar to 1 part water. And I'll put warm sugar syrup on for them. I don't boil the water. It'll be fine. Just use regular white sugar. And expect to feed 1 quart a day or 2 gallons in a week. So buy a 25-pound bag of sugar. And of course, you're going to want both boxes assembled and painted. You're going to need the second box, not because you need a box with frames on there, but because you need a box around your feeder jars, whatever they are. I use mason jars with quart mason jars. The wide mouth is probably better in the hive. Or sorry, on top of the inner cover for feeding the hive. Okay. Can you find the queen? This queen is marked, but she's at a funny angle. Here she is with her mark. And this is a frame that has pollen. I don't think there's any brood yet. She hasn't laid any eggs. There's definitely no brood older than an egg stage. And there's bees on this frame. This isn't a super densely covered frame. They do get more crowded than this, but that's what's on this frame. So most of these bees are nurse bees. Some of them could be forager bees just coming in to rest or deposit their load. You can't tell the difference from looking at them, but your nuke should have forager bees so that the hive will start foraging within about an hour of you opening the entrance if it's good enough weather. Okay, and here's another picture of a queen, and she's sitting on a frame that has some capped brood. This is like the chrysalis stage of a butterfly. These bees will emerge soon and be ready to assume some nurse bee duties. All right, beekeepers who take notes are happy beekeepers. It's important to understand a bee is an egg for 3 days. The egg is about as big as the tip of the bee's leg. And it's a larvae for 5 days, so it's open brood for about 8 days. Larvae are a lot easier to see. There's royal jelly, which is milky, in the cell with them. They don't put royal jelly in the cell that has the egg. The egg doesn't need to eat anything. It's got a little bit of food inside of its little eggshell. So once the egg emerges and becomes a little caterpillar analogous creature, then it's going to need to be fed copiously for several days. I have to confess, I do not find baby bees to be cute at all. But it's important to know what this means. This means your queen laid some eggs between 8 and 3 days ago. And it's good to know that. This is capped brood. A bee is capped brood for 13 days, about 2 weeks. The lighter the cappings, the more recently it's been capped. And this means the queen laid some eggs between 13 and 21 days ago, which is kind of stale news, but still helpful to understand. We're going to use this in later videos. I'll have reminders, don't worry, I don't do quizzes and stuff. But understanding this is really important for understanding how your hive works and how to interpret what you're seeing when you inspect down the line. You'll see all these stages with your nuke. So in fact, you can take a picture of each frame or have a buddy take a picture of each frame as you install it. Okay, next, installing your nuke. It's not as scary as you might think. There's going to be about 2,000 bees on each frame, total of 10,000. However, the majority are young nurse bees. They barely fly. Or if they fly, they don't go far. There are a significant fraction, hopefully, about 10% of those bees are forager bees. So they are going to be interpreting the situation as though their tree fell down. So what this means is when you open the flap to start removing the frames to put them in your hive, there's going to be between 20 and maybe 100 bees that fly up. They're trying to orient themselves. They can tell as soon as they fly up, or maybe because they were jostled, something terrible has happened and they have to reorient. So just ignore them, but wear your veil, maybe a long sleeve shirt, and maybe put your gloves over your cuffs, just because if a bee lands on you to catch her breath, then she might start to crawl and she might find a nook to crawl into, and you don't want that. I would also recommend not wearing sandals, but mostly when bees land on skin, they just kind of, oh, it's warm, and they catch their breath, so it's not too big of a deal. It's when they crawl into a nook or cranny that everyone has a bad moment. Okay, so just so you're ready for that, the frames are in a particular order. There's honey or honey and pollen on the outside of the nuke, and you're going to want to put frame 1 in position 1 and frame 5 in position 5. You're probably going to want to mark them too as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just to help you remember when you look in the hive next time, those frames were already drawn out. It's not a miracle that they're still drawn out and that they have stuff in them. And it's the frames that aren't numbered that you need to be watching for progress. And we'll talk more about that in a later video. So the BR stands for brood. Your brood or brood and honey frames would be in the center. And they should be in the center of your hive too. So eventually you're going to have frames 1, 2, and 3 are undrawn. Or if this is a dead out, they're already drawn frames, but there's nothing on them yet. And then the nuke frames will be positions 4 through 8. All right. Yes, just a reminder, the bees that fly up are in orienting mode. They are not in defend the hive mode. So it's all right. Just, they're going to stop and catch their breath. But this is why, oh, pardon me for a second. Oh, got a fuzzy in there. I want to install a nuke on a day where it isn't so cold that as soon as the bees fly up and then land somewhere, they start to chill and die. So I want it to be like 50 degrees or warmer and not super dewy out. I would even, if I was installing a nuke somewhere and it was too cold, I felt, to open it up, I would just set them on top of the hive and pop open their little entrance, even though they couldn't really fly that day, probably, because like if it's 40 and raining, you don't want to pull out frames, then that's okay. They might be flying before you get out there the next day. That's okay. They'll be able to reorient really well to the hive entrance down below if they started flying from the box that was situated on top of your permanent location. All right, just a little teaser for what comes up in future videos when we talk about inspecting the hive and managing the hive. 1 frame of brood becomes 2 frames covered with bees. And this happens very quickly. The population of the hive can grow very quickly because each frame of brood emerges over about 2 to 3 days. So you'll get 2 new frames of brood over like 2 days or so. A queen can fill this size frame in 2 days with eggs, or 3 days, if she's being fed well and the temperatures are warm. Yeah. So the hive population can grow quickly. Okay. Yes. Installing the bees isn't the hardest thing you'll do. And learning to read the frames as time passes, learning to understand when you have a problem and what you need to do next, and when things are going well and what to do to keep it going well, that is actually harder than installing bees. So thanks for watching. I have a website with new bee information, chickabuzz.com. Leave a comment if you have a question. You can go to the club website for my email. If you're not in my bee club, find a bee club and give it a try. If you don't like that one, find another bee club nearby and give it a try, because people in a bee club can be incredibly helpful. They'll often have their own perspective on how things should be done, and you got to balance that with what your needs are, but really it can be an incredible asset. Okay, thanks for watching. And now I'm going to close out. And nope, not that. Oh well.